You've been paying a price you didn't even know how to name. Not in money, not in time. In something quieter, something that doesn't show up on any bank statement or calendar. It shows up in your body, in the tension you carry in your shoulders when you hear the front door open, in the way you rehearse conversations before you have them, in the exhaustion you feel at the end of a day where nothing dramatic happened, but somehow you are completely empty. That price has a name. It's called emotional exhaustion, and men across the world are waking up to exactly how much of it they've been quietly paying for years without a single receipt. But here's what nobody is talking about. What happens after a man finally stops paying because something is coming? And most women are not prepared for it. You've probably noticed something shifting around you. Maybe in a man you know, maybe in yourself, a quietness that wasn't there before, a withdrawal that doesn't look like anger, because it isn't anger. It's something far more permanent than anger. Men who used to chase, pursue, show up, try harder, they're sitting down. They're going still. And in that stillness, they're discovering something that is changing them in ways that cannot be undone. Stay with me, because what I'm about to walk you through isn't just about relationships. It's about a fundamental reset that is happening right now, beneath the surface of everyday life. And by the end of this, you will understand not just why men are walking away, but what is waiting for the women who never saw it coming. If this is the kind of honest conversation you've been looking for, consider subscribing, not because I'm asking you to, because what I cover here is the kind of truth that most channels are too careful to say out loud. Here is where it starts. There is a specific kind of labor that men perform inside relationships that has no official name, no cultural recognition, and no end date. It isn't cooking or cleaning or providing financially, though men often do all of those things too. It is the labor of staying calm when everything around him is not calm, of absorbing emotional weather without complaint, of regulating not just his own internal state, but the emotional temperature of the entire household, every single day. Think about what that actually requires. It means that when tension rises, he is the one who de-escalates. When conflict erupts, he is the one who speaks carefully, measures his words, monitors his tone, because he knows that if he doesn't, if he reacts, if he cracks even slightly, the story immediately becomes about him, his reaction, his failure to handle it. He carries this not because he was asked to carry it. He carries it because no one ever told him he was allowed to put it down. And here is the part that will stay with you. The science on chronic emotional suppression is not subtle. Years of sustained emotional vigilance, years of being the stable one, the calm one, the one who holds it together, produce measurable physical changes. Elevated stress hormones, disrupted sleep, a nervous system that never fully drops out of high alert. A man in this state isn't just tired. He is depleted at a cellular level. His body has been running an emergency program so long, it forgot what normal felt like. So when he finally steps away from the environment that required all of that from him, and this is the part that surprises everyone, the first thing that happens isn't grief, it's relief. And then something else begins. Something quieter and far more significant. He starts to remember who he was before the relationship required him to be someone else. This is the part of the story no one tells. Everyone focuses on the man who left. Nobody asks what he found when he got there. What he found was himself, not the version of himself that existed to manage someone else's emotional state, not the version that braced every time he walked through his own front door, the original version, the one with preferences and humor and opinions he'd stopped expressing because expressing them had stopped feeling safe. And once a man finds that version of himself, once he remembers what it feels like to exist without constant monitoring and correction, something locks into place that is very, very difficult to reverse. He recalibrates his baseline. What this means is simple but profound. He now knows what peace feels like, not as an abstract concept, as a daily lived physical experience. And from that point forward, anything he considers letting into his life is measured against that baseline. Does this add to my peace or does it subtract from it? Most things subtract. and he has learned to say no to subtraction. Now I need to tell you about the criticism, because this is the part that people don't want to look at directly, but it is the engine of almost everything I'm describing. It doesn't start as criticism. It never does. It starts as a comment. The way he drives, the way he responded to something she said at dinner, the shirt he wore, the friend he made plans with without checking, the way he expressed affection, which was always either too much or not quite right, too formal, too casual, too available, not attentive enough. Each comment on its own is nothing, a sentence, a sigh, a look. But compounded across months and years, something happens to a man that is rarely discussed and almost never named. He begins to internalize the critic. The external voice becomes an internal one. He starts to agree, quietly, without drama, that he is fundamentally insufficient, not broken in any fixable way, just generically, structurally not enough. Always one adjustment away from acceptable, but that acceptable never actually arrives because the standard keeps moving. Psychologists call the sustained version of this chronic invalidation. The long-term data on it is not encouraging. People who experience persistent low-level criticism from a primary attachment figure show measurable changes in how they process self-worth. They stop trusting their own perception. They defer to the external voice even when it's no longer in the room. What this means practically is that a man emerging from years in a critical relationship doesn't just feel criticized. He feels wrong about himself, his instincts, his judgment, his value. And when he finally leaves that environment, the recovery is not emotional in the way people expect. It is archaeological. He has to dig. He has to excavate the parts of himself that were buried under years of correction. Figure out what he actually thinks, what he actually wants, who he actually is when nobody is grading him. This process takes time, but when it completes, and for most men who go through it, it does complete. What emerges is something the culture genuinely did not predict. A man who is completely unbothered by the prospect of being alone, not resigned to it, not making peace with it reluctantly, genuinely, actively unbothered. Because alone, to him, no longer means empty. It means undisturbed. It means his nervous system finally gets to rest. It means he wakes up in the morning, and the first emotion he feels is not low-grade dread, but something close to quiet satisfaction. He has done the math. And the math is no longer in the relationship's favor. Now here is where I need you to pay close attention, because this is the part of the conversation that is the most uncomfortable and the most necessary. What awaits the women on the other side of this shift is not punishment. It is not retribution. It is not a man somewhere plotting his revenge from a tidy apartment. It is something far harder to argue with than any of those things. It is indifference. And indifference is the most powerful force in any relational dynamic, because it cannot be reasoned with, it cannot be guilted, and it cannot be reversed by simply deciding you want the man back. Indifference means the decision was already made, quietly, internally, long before anyone announced it. It means the door wasn't slammed. It was simply closed, from the inside, by someone who had finally stopped waiting to be let in somewhere he should have always felt welcome. The women who are beginning to feel this shift are describing it in a very specific way. They are not describing men who are angry at them. They are describing men who are simply no longer there, who respond to contact with warmth, but at a distance, who are clearly doing well, clearly at peace, clearly building something that has nothing to do with the life she imagined they were working toward together. And this is what lands hardest. Not that he's struggling, but that he isn't. The man they believed would always be waiting, would always be just insecure enough to come back, just lonely enough to reconsider, is instead thriving, growing, becoming, in his late 30s and 40s, more grounded and purposeful and quietly magnetic than he ever was when he was trying to earn her approval. That realization doesn't arrive as a single moment. It accumulates. It arrives in small, unglamorous instants. when she sees his name somewhere and feels something she doesn't want to name, when she meets someone new and realizes, without wanting to, that the new person doesn't hold a candle, when she sits in her apartment on a Sunday afternoon and the silence feels like a different kind of silence than the freedom she was promised. Not peaceful, just empty. And I want to be honest here, because this conversation deserves honesty, not weaponization. This is not a story about women being wrong for wanting things. It is not a celebration of suffering. It is a description of a consequence that was logical, that was predictable, and that nobody was honest enough to name while there was still time to change course.